So welcome everybody. I can see that a lot of folks are still rolling in. We had well over 100 folks enroll for this event, so very excited and ready to kick things off. For this, we only budgeted 20 minutes. We wanted to really hit this with a heavy punch and get to the things that are most relevant for you guys. So somewhat of a new format for us. So with that, we have a compressed time. I just want to share a couple things before we get started. One is that this will be recorded and we will share out this video. Feel free to send this around within your organization. Our goal here is to spread knowledge and encourage you guys to do the same. Secondly, we're going to be focused. The lead and copper rule in general is large, it's complex, it's becoming more and more serious. There are certainly a lot of unknowns. However, what we're going to focus on today are the things that we believe are non-regretted, what everyone should be doing and focusing on today. We're going to get pretty tactical here. We're going to show you guys a demonstration of some of the best practices we're seeing with communities. We're going to be showing through our platform, but please note this is not a sales pitch. There are other platforms out there that others on this call may already utilize, and that's fine. What we do want to do is demonstrate those best practices through the use of a technology platform like ours. And finally, and somewhat logistically oriented, because we only have 20 minutes, we may not get to every question, but as you can see on the right hand of your screen, you have this control panel. If you do want to ask a question, please utilize the questions feature. I will do my best to pepper in the questions to Andy as they are relevant. If we don't get to your question, we will promise to follow up individually and make sure that these questions do get answered. That's important to us. So with all that said, I'm going to kick the ball over to Andy. Andy's going to be doing about 15 minutes of presentation here, and we can, again, get some questions answered after that and have a few follow-up poll questions for you guys. So Andy, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So main topic of conversation here today is clearly lead and copper, and it's a collection of what we've been hearing from our clients as their challenges when managing lead and copper data. For the most part, we're seeing our clients bring something similar to this to the table when onboarding to Utility Cloud. It is a plethora of data, however, it's in a centralized place. And that makes it challenging for teams of people to provide input collectively to keep this data up to date. In this particular spreadsheet, which is the sample set of data that I'll be using here, we have 3,800 services, and attempting to understand our current material of our services is the real challenge that we're attacking. So we'll be talking about collecting and keeping a utility's information up to date, leveraging field staff. And then additionally, once you do understand what you might be challenged with your service line material, what you can do, what kind of sampling requirements you're required to take, helping with notifications out to those public entities, and what we can do to facilitate some communication and data collection and data management. So when challenged with, I have a spreadsheet, I want to come onto a technology platform, we need to associate a data schema. Here we have some fields, and in Utility Cloud, we refer to these as asset classes. So I'm going to show you how we, just being able to configure, whether it's a GIS native system or a operationally based system, we need to be able to create these fields that accommodate our data. And the headers are the most important part. So when we see the things that are important, we absolutely have to have material of service, should have street. I think that some information on the customer and the current location is fairly important as well. Year built with the new concept of assumed material is another key feature. So here we have our asset class with validated fields for material of service as a list. Things like that are from a technology platform are going to help with data collection when distributing out to field staff. So once we have our data schema set, we're going to create our assets. We're gonna bring these in, and here we have a specific asset that is of unknown material. So what we've done is we've created a process to say, I'm gonna leverage everybody in my field staff to collect this information and feed information up to our source of truth that we've created, our database. Really, any work event that has exposure to your service line, whether you're in a trench looking at mains, whether you're at the meter looking through, looking at the stub before the main, before the meter, any of those points of contact with this can feed into attributes based on work events. We've created an identifying service line specific web form that can be performed by field staff to more aggressively go out and try and identify our inventory. So some common practices when dealing with lead, trying to scratch the pipe with a key and identify whether or not we saw any shiny silver. No. Did we place a magnet on the pipe? No. That's indications that you might have lead. If you're using an actual sample, then you would say yes. Did the instant, and then here we're prompting the users, those field staff, to say, this is an intuitive form. We want you to fill this data out. We need it to be required. Did we get a detection? Yes. Well, here we're gonna say, yep, we have a lead, and we're gonna allow for a signature. That is populating back to the asset the material of service from unknown to our newly collected data. And it's also doing a number of other things where it's creating the next step in our process, which is we want to sample. We need to go to the tap in the house, schedule that event, and then collect a water sample from this house now that we have a known lead service. So material service, now lead. We're going to work with the customer to get this scheduled. We're going to drop it off today, and we're going to leave it on the porch. Now, the nuances of dealing with public and the sensitivity around lead and compliance and their water quality can be onerous at best. But I think it's important that we're clear with our communities that we're taking a proactive approach to this challenge. At this time, we might know that their service is lead, we might not, but we do want to, basically bring them into the process and expose them to say, yep, we're taking this, we're collecting information on you. So they would fill their bottle. They didn't leave a chain of custody. Was the sample accepted? Yes, they did fill it. We have the ability to scan in or take a picture of the bottle if we didn't have that. But we'll send that data out to the lab. Now the water sample's at the lab, and we're going to bring back in that data to Utility Cloud as a LIMS system and help with some of that public notification to say, we have the results from your sample. Here's some things that you can know about from lead and copper. So we're going to do, so we've identified our service material. We're going through, we've dropped our sample off and collected it. Now we've received our sample back from the lab. It went to the lab. It was acquired on Tuesday. It was analyzed yesterday. It was taken from the kitchen sink. And what were the results? Luckily, we got a low detection on this one. It was 0.002, well below the threshold. Additionally, we got a copper sample back. That was 0.0. The lab operator was Andy. And here I want to highlight our ability, and I think a key component of any lead and copper program is the ability to distribute out reporting to the public. So we have users within Utility Cloud, that would be your utility, but we need that connection point out to the community and any resident that might need it. So I would just say, here we have on our asset, their email address. I can stick that in here and they will receive a report on your behalf on the submission of this piece of work. It will also create an attachment back to our asset so that record keeping is integral to your management program. Custom reporting, the distribution of these, and then the record keeping component is really a key factor to say when scrutinized by a regulatory authority that we have our ducks in a row and we're ready and prepared to service our community. So we've made some updates. We have some timeline happening here, and we'll see the attachment come in. But I think that the key component is that we're proactively updating our data. So whether or not we're looking at our service connections, we had those 3,800. If we wanted to identify other service connections with unknown service material, we could query that and then perform work against those, that sort of validated data repository.
Hey, Andy, one question here. Maybe it was back on the prior step that you went through. Are there other mechanisms or ways to get lab result data into the platform, or how do you see sort of best practice in terms of managing the sample results from the lab?
Yeah, really any component of like a data where you have to send a sample out to a lab and then get that EDD back in. I can't remember the number of times that an EDD sat in somebody's inbox and was left unanalyzed. Certainly trying to, like part of our implementations throughout Utility Cloud is to eliminate that manual effort and that manual step of having to key in data, especially when dealing with, approximately 2,100 instances of this process. So we're going to look for optimizations to say, how do we get this data brought into the system more automated? There are anywhere from EDDs where you can import that data to like establishing an email address where you can send in that EDD or have the lab deliver it directly to you, all the way up to, at certain scale, we have seen some clients go full-blown integration with third-party labs where the instrument in our contract lab is actually communicating with this asset, and it'd be able to propagate that lab analysis right to the system. I will say that last component is certainly a larger order utilities option, but there are some lower thresholds where automation provides an enormous value where there is no more human component of loading in that lab data to the correct asset. You would just need to have pretty tight chain of custody with that contract lab to make sure that your asset ID, unique throughout all of Utility Cloud, would be the sample ID as reported to the lab. So that way, when they report it back, that same sample came in on the correct asset.
Yep, perfect. Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, look, just from my perspective, from what Andy's shown this far, when we look at the lead and copper rule, I think there are a couple components here that are really key. I mean, one is making sure that the data that is being collected is highly standardized, quality controlled, and therefore actionable in the database. Secondly, that the information that's collected is actually correlated and updated to the asset, so that it's not just a work history that you have, but it's also correlated to your asset database. That's critically important, especially when it comes to inventorying your service line material. And then there's two other components. I think, Andy, you might be showing this one next, but one is like the handling of what's next. There's kind of there's a lot of if then, and providing that kind of automation of what happens next in this process is absolutely critical. It can get complex and it can get unwieldy, and the bigger the team and the more unknown service lines you have, the more tricky the situation. And then finally is that that communication piece out to stakeholders. So
yeah, the automation piece is it's funny. There are kind of two types of software out there. There's software that you fit into, and then software that fit around you. We like to talk about how Utility Cloud can fit around you, and I think that's a key value component that we need to highlight. Is so EPA because this is a changing regulation, being able to adapt your platform is an important part. So when we get to the identifying service line, that starts this whole process forward. We're leveraging automation to say, what is the next step in the process? What are the optional steps that could come next? And then leveraging automation native to the system to say, well, we know we're going to have to pass a ticket off to the next person or a next department. So there might be a field component, then compliance and regulatory compliance comes out with sampling. Or there might be a replacement component. Now that we know we have lead, we have to get that scheduled and hire a contractor to get that line ripped out. These types of automations that really ask questions, we will, it kind of their lead questions when we go through an implementation to say, hey, utility X or client Y, what is the next step in your process? And ultimately what we hear through our implementing Utility Cloud is that utilities learn and refine their business processes through those questions. So really that wrapping around, if there wasn't a set process established, asking them helps it helps firm up the roles and responsibilities internal to the business. So this, and I want to come back around to it. This was the final deliverable from today that was the submission of, and it went out to that public email, anthony@gmail.com, which is just a fake email, but this is the type of letter that you can just generate and have distributed out to your client to say, we want a touch point. We know we have this massive communication effort. It doesn't have to be a big service of let's go out and collect all the data, bring it back in and send all this mail. There can be an automation where we're hearing from our clients, they're starting to leverage email with their service lines, their properties, their property owners. People are more willing to receive sensitive communications like this via electronic methodology. I think regulatory agencies are ready for it too. It's really just making sure that we have a deliverable system to say we need to get the information out there. That's the most important part, and that we have auditable tracks to say, did it go out? Yes, it did. Here's a copy of it.
Awesome. I mean, it's beautiful. It's a huge, for folks, I mean, look, this is, we'll ask some questions in a few minutes just to gauge where people are kind of at in the process. But as you can see, this is a very proactive, highly engaged way to be managing your program, delivering clearly a lot of confidence to your communities that you guys are on top of this stuff. So that's awesome. One question that I know there are several questions. We are definitely not going to be able to get to all of them. One question here, just wanted to hit on, Andy, if you could talk about maybe replacement methodology. That was maybe one part of this program that we haven't gotten to in this little demo. How have you seen communities addressing that with the kind of the big bill coming there?
Yeah, and this is where we're getting beyond software, right? This is now getting into just industry, an industry challenge. We had 2,500 unknown services from this sample set taken from a client. And I think there's some really unique construction technologies evolving around this need. Anecdotally, I was working with a customer and they were showing me this technology that basically had a reel at the end of an excavator. So you dig a pit in the street, you don't have to trench all the way to the house or anything, and it would pull the lead service line through and reel it through a hydraulic reel and then slip behind it a plastic pipe to replace it. So the excavation, the disturbance of the land was minimal. However, so it was a really efficient way to swap out a service line. I thought that was just a really innovative adaptation from the construction industry as well.
It's awesome. I didn't know about that one. That is exciting. Awesome. Well, guys, we're coming up pretty close on time here. Clearly, a lot of really strong takeaways, and we're always happy to field additional, more detailed questions on this stuff, whether it pertains to our product or not, we're happy to engage. Before we sign off, just wanted to quickly launch a couple questions. One of the things that we do here in these skill series is we try and gauge where people are at, and we want to share that information on a no names basis with the attendees here. Just to, again, something you guys can take back to your organizations and say, hey, utilities like us are answering this way versus that, or we seem to be behind the game here or ahead of game there. So I'm going to launch a couple questions. Again, we're happy to share the results of this on a completely no names, anonymous basis. And let's get it going. So you guys should see, Andy, can you see that at least? Poll here, the lead and copper.
There's a poll open. Yep.
Awesome, perfect. So the lead and copper rule is A, not a priority for my organization, B, a priority on the horizon, and C, an urgent priority. And as these polls are coming in, I always like to provide my best commentary. So yeah, it looks about 50-50 split. So no one, 0, are saying that this is not a priority for my organization. That makes sense. And then we're basically split right down the middle on it's a priority, but it's on the horizon, and it's an urgent priority. I'm sure in part related to geographic differences and things like that, but that's great. So let's move on to our second poll. As it pertains to keeping, sorry, the toolbar is kind of in my way here. As it pertains to keeping track of assets and work scheduling for lead and copper, our organization, A, has the technology in place and plan to use it. B, has the technology but has not yet planned how to use it. And C, does not have the technology in place. All right, early lead here. It's actually pretty split. Under a third has the technology in place and a plan to use it. Almost half have the technology but not yet with a plan to use it, and now looking like coming out at about a third. So does not have the technology in place. Okay. And finally, we'll get to our third. This sort of a takeaway. Are you interested in learning more about Utility Cloud? That, by the way, that is, again, not necessarily sales related. This could be for our existing customers related to this particular solution. So feel free, we won't comment on this one. If you'd like a follow-up, that's great. We will be happy to do that. And otherwise, we, again, will continue to invite you to these as educational skill series. So cool. Andy, any last words before we sign off? Or are we good to roll out?
No, this has been good.
Awesome. Guys, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Again, we will be sending an automated email after this with this recording. Feel free to send it around. Hopefully it was really useful for you. And thanks again. Thanks for the time. We'll be in touch. Thank you, guys.